Good morning. Welcome to the Friday Gimbal Show and welcome our guest today, Kevin McLean. Kevin, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Chief.
He's a repeat guest. He joined us back in June. So if you go to our YouTube channel and check out the June 9th video, you'll see some of Kevin's comments all the way back to that date. But today, he's joining and we're going to have some fun talking not only about the markets, about patriotism, and also about Christmas. So what do you think over here? The moving disclaimer I put there, I found that evidently on some chainsaw boxes, it says, do not hold the wrong end of the chainsaw. Think that's going to be a problem, Kevin?
I don't think it specifies on what the wrong end is.
Okay. So we're going to have to help them figure it out. How about this, Kevin? What are you doing tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be going ahead and chopping down some trees.
Oh, you're going with me. So we're going to be using a chainsaw tomorrow morning, help a widow out. She's got some dead trees and we're going to jump in there and make it a great day for her. I think they had 10 dead pine trees when I was checking it out. So we'll see what happens. I'm not going to, they don't trust me with the chainsaw. There'd be missing body parts, I think, if they gave me the chainsaw.
You'd be holding the wrong end.
I would be doing something wrong, that's for sure. I would be doing something wrong. Well, let's take a quick look at the markets, and we probably won't have to spend a ton of time on this. I'm going to put the NASDAQ up here if it's going to populate for me. We've had a good week in the market this week, and we've said when Doug's been here before that if you had a chart like this one I'm sharing with you and we threw it on the floor and you look down at it, you should be able to tell whether we're in a good market or not. You see why we say that, Kevin?
It's driving.
It's angled up, and if we go back, that was the daily chart that I was just showing you all, and if we go back to just a few weeks or months ago, and we'd thrown it on the ground, you can see that. But even with the rally we've had, we're still at the same level we were at almost 3 years ago. So the market has gone downwards and sideways. We've had a good year in 2023, but it's still not near the levels that it was in 2021. So thankfully, we're going back up, and this week has proven to be a good week for the NASDAQ. One of the things that we've talked about on the show here before is the Magnificent Seven, or the FANG stocks. Have you heard of the FANG stocks before? Or is that?
I haven't. That's new to me.
Yeah. So FANG stocks were Facebook, which is now Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Microsoft. They call them like the Magnificent Seven is what they are. And I wasn't just point something out to you all here on the S&P 500 chart. The S&P 500 is 500 of the largest companies in the United States. The S&P 500 is what's called a weighted index, and it means that it's not equally dispersed. The same amount of money is not in each of the 500 companies. The 500 companies that are valued the most, they get more percentage of the money that comes into the S&P 500 investments. And so right now, about 40% of the valuation of the S&P 500 index is those magnificent seven stocks that I mentioned.
Wow.
So what you could say is, as those 7 or 8 stocks go, so go the index. And forget which day it was. It was probably Wednesday this week. It was the first day since July of 2022 that even though all 7 of those magnificent stocks dropped in value, the S&P 500 went up. And so that was one of these 2 days right here. And why that's significant is if those 7 or 8 stocks are driving the market and they are overpriced in our view, then it doesn't leave much room for the rest of the market to go up in value unless those other 493 stocks start to show some interest and curiosity in the marketplace. So for the first time in over 2 years, we saw the other 493 stocks pick up this week.
Pick up the slack.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's a good thing for the market. That makes us more optimistic when we see that. And one place you can see that, this is the S&P 600 market index, and the S&P 600 is representative of smaller companies that you wouldn't necessarily know about. You've got a Celsius strength there. I don't know how big Celsius is. Let me look here and see.
I think it's owned by, oh, is it, I'm sorry,
Yep.
I'm thinking of, right,
Yeah, so it's a $231 million company, which is in the indices, that's a pretty small company. And so it would be one of the small companies that's represented in the S&P small cap 600 index there. And so there's a lot of big companies that are considered small in the marketplace, which you would think something like that would be a big company, but relative to the stock market, it's not a big company. And so this is a picture of the S&P 600 over the last 12 months. And what's your opinion of that chart versus the S&P 500 I showed you?
it's more volatile than the other one. However, it has risen since, October,
This year.
yeah, October this year,
Yeah.
risen almost 200 more than.
Yeah, and the problem with this kind of volatility is you really struggle to make any money. If you bought it at 1135, which you can't buy the index, but I'm just saying in December a year ago, by February a year ago, is all the way up to 1320, which is almost a 20% increase in your money. And then by the same amount of time going forward, it dropped back down and it formed kind of a equal version of a triangle. I forget what you call those, that where they're kind of a perfect triangle like that. And so when you get that kind of geometric movement in a stock index like that, it's hard for somebody to make money because you just get worn out emotionally. Like if you bought it at that level and you rode it all the way up and then all the way back down, and you look at your statement and it's had a lot of ups and downs, but it hadn't made any forward progress. And so when I show you this on a weekly basis, that S&P 600 has just been trending downward really for a couple of years here. And then if we go to the monthly basis, you can see that it had a good run from 2009 all the way through 2021. This is the COVID kind of blip in the market here. But really, since it peaked out over here right after COVID, it's been trending down. But what happened this week is this is the first week we saw a lot of activity where money is going into the smaller companies. And that quote that I shared with you earlier, that it was the first day since July 2022 that the Magnificent Seven fell, but the market went up. That's evident in the small companies. I think I'm only going to show you all one more market thing, and that's the VIX. The VIX is an indication of how volatile the market is. It's not the market itself, but the measure of the stock options which are represented in the market. And what we've talked about is generally it's a lot safer to be in the market when the VIX is below 20. And here we are today with it around 12. And so we're optimistic going into the end of the year. And hopefully you all will start to see some, positive things on your statements year end. Let's see. So let's talk about tomorrow. You're going to have a chainsaw opportunity tomorrow, Kevin. But tomorrow represents the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. So you brought us some show and tell with our tea here. Where do you notice like taxes hitting you?
Taxes. That's a great question. Not too much since I am a college student. I don't work so much, so I'm not taxed to a great extent. Tax, probably sales tax.
Sales tax?
Overall, yeah, because I'm not, like I don't own a home right now, so it's not property tax, and I'm not getting paid a whole lot of money because I'm in college and also.
So if you're living tax free right now, you don't need to throw the tea into the harbor yet, huh?
Essentially, yeah.
What's the gas price in Hanson, Kentucky, roughly?
Hanson was 255 in the drive up. Murray was 249, but I filled up for 239.
239 gas. What do you think it is? What's it in Fishers, Indiana? Did you notice?
Probably right around 3.
Yeah, and most likely the difference between that 239 and the $3 is gas taxes. Like,
Really?
yeah, and if you go out to the West Coast, you're probably gonna pay $5 or $6 a gallon for gas, and that's all built into the tax system. And so the our forefathers, when they were throwing the tea, and it wasn't only in Boston, there were these tea parties going on all over the East Coast, but they were just saying, hey, we came over here for some liberty and some freedom, and we don't want to be controlled by your taxes. And so the Boston Tea Party, it was a big deal. Whether or not it's as familiar in people's minds as it might have been a decade or two ago is hard to know. But another tax that's going on right now that's really affecting probably college students and retired people is inflation. Have you noticed that in your existence?
So inflation's counted as tax?
I count it as a tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably, I can't remember the exact percentages, but it's been crazy for the last 3 years.
Have you noticed it? Where have you noticed it? Like in groceries and things like that, or what?
Everything, and absolutely everything.
Yeah, and the reason that inflation is a tax is it's kind of like carbon monoxide poisoning. Is the inflation is created by the Federal Reserve, which the federal government has influence over the Federal Reserve, and when they start turning on the printing presses and print more money, it makes the money you have worth less. And so the tendency for people to do is to blame the retailers or the manufacturers on inflation, where in fact it's the government that creates the inflation. And so it's what I'm trying to become kind of the cheerleader of people saying is that it's not that the cost of things are more, it's that your dollars are worth less, so you have to spend more dollars to buy the same thing. Our January anchor is going to have a story about that, and I was using a bag of Fritos as an example. It was kind of tongue in cheek, talking about how with most potato chips over the years, they inflate them a lot. Like in the bag is like thick because they've got so much air in there, and there may not be so much stuff in there. But I opened a bag of Fritos sometime in the last couple months, and it was the jumbo bag, but I think it's like $9 for a bag of Fritos.
One thing that you might not realize is that they might have the same bag or the same type of bag, same price, but the amount that's in it is less.
That's another trick of inflation, and I'm trying to think of a recent example where I saw that happen, where somebody was complaining about it. But historically, where you can see inflation hitting the ordinary consumer is in candy bars. Over the years, what the candy bar companies would do is that when pricing was stable, you'd get a big candy bar, and then all of a sudden when inflation hits, they would keep the price of a candy bar the same. It would just start getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so I think that might be one of my favorite candies of old was a Tootsie Roll. And the standard Tootsie Roll was probably about 2 inches long. And I think from inflationary things where they start shrinking is where you get the little snack size Tootsie Rolls. Now the marketers, after a season of inflation, thought, oh, we can sell these little ones for snacks. Planet Fitness, they use the little micro Tootsie Rolls. Did you know that?
Yeah.
There's a plug for Planet Fitness, all you New Year's Eve people going into the New Year's resolutions. As you walk into Planet Fitness, they have a purple kind of Tootsie Roll in a big jar, and then the brown traditional Tootsie Rolls in there. So I don't know the logic. Maybe I have to look that up. Why they, after you get a good workout, they're giving you candy as you're walking out the door.
I know that some sugar is good for you.
Okay.
So like, yeah, some sugar before.
So like that whole handful that I throw in my pocket, is that the sum, or is that?
I think that counterbalance what you just said.
Okay, so yeah. Well, let's look at something else here. If you go back and look at when Kevin joined us a few months ago, we talked a little bit about the benefits of the military and how that helped in your education, and the Boston Tea Party, the Revolutionary War. Those people that were loyal to the British people, or those people that were rebelling. You never know who was who, and so being kind of part of the revolution was a risky thing. And so people throwing the tea in the Tea Party was risky, and to be a soldier, which you served us well on, that is a risky thing, and we're very thankful for that. Let's talk about credit cards. How many credit cards do you have?
One.
One, okay.
One.
I have three. Do you carry a balance on yours? This is getting real personal here. Kevin wasn't prepared for this. Kevin is my son-in-law, so his father-in-law's grilling him on live TV here about his credit card balance.
I pay it off, the statement balance every month.
You pay it off every month.
Yeah, the
And-
statement balance.
and-
So like they might carry on a charge from like previous things, which might be like a few $100s or so.
Yeah, so if you carry a balance on the statement, that's where they start charging you interest.
Correct.
And you're saying you avoid all interest, is
Yes.
what you're telling me. Okay. I didn't understand this. I'm old, right? Like, and so
Young at heart.
young at heart. So in the 1980s, when I was at Murray State, a student could not get a regular credit card. Like, really, most people couldn't get credit cards in the 1980s. Like, it was an unusual thing. And there was this retailer that showed up on campus. They'd set a table with their little cloth draped over it and try to get you to sign up for their credit card. And it was a company called Sears and Roebuck. Sears and Roebuck was based out of Chicago, Illinois. Do you know that company?
Sears.
Yes.
Are they still around?
No, I don't think so. I think they have all disbanded. But like Chicago, Kevin grew up in Chicago, and the Sears Tower was in downtown Chicago forever. And I don't remember who owns it now. So I think it's an insurance company. I can't remember. But Sears came to campus, and I got a Sears credit card. It wasn't even the shape of the
Like the
ones.
regular.
Yeah, it was kind of like this shape. It was kind of squatty and long, was the Sears credit card. And to buy something, you would go to the counter, they would lay it on this metal thing, and they had this kerchunker. They would put the credit card thing in there, and they go kerchunk, and it would run this thing over the numbers, and they used sign that I did spend that money. And that's how the Sears credit card worked in the 1980s. And so the banks weren't making that freely available to people. And it saved my hide, because my first job interview where I flew someplace was with the National Security Agency. And I'd never flown alone. I'm just this little country boy from Evansville on the airplane, landing in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm standing by the carousel waiting on my luggage. No luggage. My interview is with the government the next morning, and I have no luggage. So I'm in jeans and a t-shirt, which you might get away with today on an interview. Back then, like, suit is what was expected for a job interview. And so I'm like, well, I wasted this trip. And so I took my Sears credit, because I didn't have that much cash. They were paying for my flight and things, so I didn't have enough cash to buy clothes. So I went to the local Sears and bought my clothes for the interview for the next day.
Wow.
But that was my first credit card. Then when I traveled, I didn't take the job with the National Security Agency. I landed in Houston with Texas Instruments, and had a real credit card. I don't remember if it was, it might have been a Discover card. It was a Visa or a Discover, but I got to this point in time, and I thought I was a big deal, because I was making, as a college graduate, I was making 90% of what my mom was as a teacher after 30 some odd years, and probably 80% of what my dad was as an engineer. And so I had a pretty good starting salary. So I decided, when I'd come back to Evansville for Christmas, I would bring bougie, as you guys say, gifts. And,
Bougie.
yeah, and so I would run up a balance on my credit card every December, and probably a couple $1,000s, which would probably be close to $6,000 or $7,000 in today's dollars, and get everybody really nice gifts. And then I'd spend the rest of the year paying off the credit card balance.
Ooh.
And there wasn't the financial education that you have today. Like, nobody was talking about it back in the 80s. It wasn't the internet. And the only education I had was pulling up my credit card statement every month and just studying it to make sure all the charges looked right. And then there was one called interest that was like $150 a month on that $2,000 balance. I'm like, what is this? And then I started studying it, reading the fine print, and I'm like, I'm paying 20% interest on this stupid balance.
With financial education, I think it's very dependent on the person to seek that education, like to seek that knowledge, seek that guidance rather than it being taught to them. People are more open and everything's like more open, everyone's talking more, so you're able to find out stuff more easily, most likely. However, it's really dependent on the person. I don't think I was ever like taught without seeking.
So you weren't taught, don't carry a balance. You figured it out on your own.
Yeah, from probably a whole lot of other people who carried a balance and then owed 36% for a credit card.
Yeah, it is. And Kevin was telling me he might need to be sarcastic today, and I warned him against it. But I would suggest to you, generally, the banks are not your friend. They're not loaning you money because they like you. They're not taking your money in a savings account, paying you interest because they like you. They make the difference between what they hold your savings and what they lend it out in credit cards. So if they're paying you 2% on your savings account and they're getting me to pay 20% on my credit card, they have a big range of money they can make on just being the bank and rolling money in and out. And so they may tell you this makes the most sense for you, but you need to educate yourself a bit to know whether it actually makes sense or not.
100%.
Yeah. So I found some data on credit cards as we're looking at it that right now the average credit card balance in just the last 30 days for all credit cards across the country is averaged over $6,000. So just imagine everybody you see, if they have only one credit card, the balance they're carrying is $6,000.
Personal use, each person or each card?
Each card is what it says. So if they have 3 cards, like I have,
18.
a normal person would have 6,000 on each of those.
Oh my,
And
that's sick.
it is there's in the book of Proverbs, there's a thing called it's called usury, and usury is the idea that you loan money to somebody at a high interest rate, and usury is considered in the biblical days a crime like theft and other things. And so if you're watching and you're curious about usury, you can look at maybe Google and see what usury rates are today. I think the government would call usury rates something over 25%, but most likely if somebody's paying 10 or 12%, that's pretty usurious in their cost to borrow money, because it's hard if you got $18,000 in debt and you're paying 20% on that. That's $3,600 a year just in interest you're paying. So you've dug a hole that paying your monthly payments may not be able to fill in very soon. So $6,000 a credit card. The number I have here is actually 6,088. Sometime this fall, the total balance of credit cards crossed over $1 trillion in the United States. 1 trillion. And on past shows, we've talked to you all about what a trillion is. It's a huge number. I can't even, I don't remember all the data on it, but it's a lot.
We're spending.
Mostly. So that's what I looked up, is to see today, generally, what are the top 10 things people are putting on their credit cards? And I don't watch Dave Ramsey. He does a lot to teach people about how to get rid of credit cards. But I did early on, I'd put fast food on a credit card, and to imagine that dinner that you paid $100 for maybe you bought it for some people that you're paying $20 a year for that dinner because you never paid off that balance is crazy. And so the retail purchases are one of them. Groceries, dining out is probably a big one now. Travel expenses. Some people put utilities and healthcare, entertainment, online shopping, transportation, and subscriptions, whatever that might be. Apps or whatever that are your Apple probably comes right out of a card or something like that. I had breakfast with a banker this week, and we were just talking about life and things, and offered some opinions. And the banks evidently study their own personal data of how you all are spending money, and so they have their own statistics of the top 10 things people are spending their money on. It helps them better understand consumer behavior. Probably if you're spending money on travel, they're probably going to start advertising travel loans to you in some way. So that's probably how they're using that consumer data. But there is a up and coming sector of our market, of our economy, that broke into the top 10 for them this year. And it's not one of these 10.
Do I want to guess?
I'm just throwing it out there.
And it's a whole separate one?
It's a separate one, and it's advertised as probably it's advertised, particularly on the weekends, as much as any other advertisement you're going to see. And it's advertised specifically during sporting events.
Oh, like DraftKings and stuff like that?
It is, yeah.
So
Yeah.
gambling?
Gambling has made the top 10 out of this list I gave you, and their subset, the gambling has gone to the top 10. So
Gambling on a credit card?
yeah,
I know you get like a cash forward balance or something like that.
yeah. So they link it to your credit card, and it has become a top expense. And so with addictions that people have, it's probably not going to be unusual that we're going to see some gambling problems in the next 5. I mean, you have debt problems already, right? Like they're not paying off their bill with $1 trillion worth of credit card balances. But to think that there are, and they're marketing to young men like you, like it's not. I don't think they're marketing it to me. Like they're offering me $25 to get $150 free or something like that. Like that doesn't even remotely intrigue me at this point in my life. But with somebody that $150 sounds like a big amount of money, that's who they're targeting with those ads. And I think it's diabolical. I think it's evil. But that's just Keith's opinion. Do you have an opinion about that?
I try not to be as cynical these days, but yeah.
Well, let's jump to the Christmas holidays. Doug's not here, so I can tell you the origins of Christmas. And those of you that don't want to hear whether or not Santa Claus is real, now is the time to click the exit the show, because I'm going to give you a little Christmas, and then I'm going to wish you Merry Christmas, because I'm not going to be here next Friday, but Doug will have an opportunity to wish you guys Merry Christmas as well. But there's a Roman holiday called Saturnalia that was generally used to celebrate the harvest. And right around that time, the Catholic Church in Rome, this Roman holiday, was getting irritated because the pagans were acting like pagans. They would light, because it wasn't electricity, right? So the lights that you see with Christmas, it came from Saturnalia. They would light things up to celebrate a good harvest. They would just carouse and get drunk and everything else. So I just envision the Catholic Church pounding the table is, why are they acting like pagans? And they were acting like pagans because they were pagans. Pagan is just a term for an ungodly person. And so the Catholic Church would just get angry and try to get the pagans to not act like pagans. And so finally, what they did is they came up with the Christ Mass. So they picked December 25th to start having a Mass, and that's where the word Christmas came from. It had nothing. They decided to celebrate Christ's birth and call it Christ Mass. It has no correlation with the day that Christ was actually born. And so the pagans are now competing with the Roman Catholic Church, and then the evolution of the Christ Mass has got to where it is today. And today it's just become really a credit card holiday.
Wow, yeah, gift giving.
Yeah, and most people, I'm guessing a lot of people, they know the word Christmas, but they're probably not integrating that it's a Christ-based holiday from how it evolved out of its pagan roots, that it came through the Catholic Church. And so that holiday creates some traditions, and traditions, they can lock you up if you get too bound in the traditions. But are there any traditions you had as a kid that come to mind?
Traditions. Not that I could think of.
Yeah, for the Tyner kids, we would go to the movie theater, buy a movie theater popcorn, and drive around Fisher's and Carmel and go Christmas light looking.
Yeah.
And as a kid, we would go to my grandmother's house for Christmas Eve, and we'd go in the basement, and Santa would come down the chimney early for us on Christmas Eve. We were like, wow, how'd he get here today? And then we would have an aluminum foil tree full of Christmas presents there. Then we'd go home. Next morning, we'd have Christmas under our Christmas tree. We'd play with those toys for an hour or two, then we'd have to get packed up to go to Bloomington, Indiana, and celebrate with my grandmother and grandfather there. And that was kind of the childhood tradition for us. As a dad, I've tried to keep traditions from getting too cemented for the kids, knowing that one day they're going to have their own families, and I don't want them feeling locked into what we did. Like to have to come to our house if you guys have your own family, you got stuff to do. I don't want them to feel like we're really missing out. I just want them to enjoy the family. And that's probably if you go back to the Romans and the Christians and all of that, probably the biggest thing is celebrating family and being thankful for them. And today, I'm thankful to call you my son. So Kevin, have a Merry Christmas. You guys that are hanging out with us today, you guys have a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you after the New Year.